Your children don't always bury you in the ground. Sometimes they bury you alive and smile while doing it. This is the story of how I made my own son regret forgetting whose blood built his life. I used to believe the loudest heartbreak came from funerals, from the moment dirt hits the coffin and the world knows someone is gone. But I learned something far worse, the soft betrayal of someone who shares your face, your blood, and your history, telling others you're fading before you ever begin to dim. My name is Evelyn Cross, 76 years old, and I've spent every breath of my life loving a son who believed time made me disposable. But this isn't a story about frailty. It's the story of what happens when a quiet woman refuses to disappear. It began on a Wednesday morning, the kind of morning that pretends nothing bad could possibly happen. The sun was gentle, the kitchen smelled like warm cinnamon tea, and the window was half open, letting the autumn breeze whisper through the curtains. I'd been on my feet too long stirring soup for lunch when a sharp dizziness split across my forehead. I reached for the counter, but my fingers brushed air. The room spun, the floor tilted, and I fell hard enough that the spoon clattered across the tiles. For a moment everything dimmed, not because my body was failing, but because I knew that when I called my son, he would not come with love. He would come with judgment. Still I dialed. Mason answered on the second ring. "Mom, what now?" His tone sliced deeper than the fall. "Just dizzy," I whispered. "I think my sugar dropped." He sighed loudly as though I'd inconvenienced his entire week. "I'll come by tonight." Tonight. Not now. Not soon. Tonight. His father, God rest his soul, would have sprinted barefoot across glass to reach me. Mason. He scheduled his care like an appointment he didn't want. When he finally arrived hours later, his wife Lena was with him, her perfume entering the house before her footsteps did. She put a hand on my shoulder with the same tenderness one would use for a cracked vase. "You poor thing," she said, though her eyes stayed cold. "It's just not safe for you anymore." Safe! That word rolled through the air like poison. Mason exchanged a look with her, quiet, practiced, mechanical, and I understood something had been decided long before that day. The following week was carved into rehearsed concern. They brought store-bought soup and left it untouched on the counter. They asked questions about my medications, which I'd been taking responsibly for years. They inquired about my will, my insurance, my property papers, quietly, always quietly, as though they were checking off a list. At first I forced myself to believe they were finally being thoughtful. But the truth was a shadow behind their politeness. One night, while I pretended to sleep in my recliner, I overheard Lena whisper, "She's slowing down. If we don't handle things now, we'll get stuck with all her chaos later." Chaos. That's what she called my life. My marriage, my sacrifices, my home, my memories. Chaos. I pressed my lips together as if holding in a scream could stop my heart from shattering. They were planning something, and it was coming fast. The following Monday, Mason announced he wanted to treat me. "Lunch out," he said. "Just you, me, and Lena." I should have known better. People who bring betrayal don't usually bring dessert. I didn't pack a bag, didn't grab my phone charger, didn't even bring my cardigan despite the cloudy sky. I wanted to believe, desperately, that this was love resurfacing. We drove for 20 minutes in silence, the kind that feels like the world is holding its breath. When the car finally stopped, I looked out the window expecting a quaint cafe. Instead, beige walls, a buzzer door, plastic flowers dying in the sun, a residential care facility. My throat went cold. "Mason," I whispered. He didn't meet my eyes. "Just for a few days, Mom, until you get evaluated." Evaluated. As if my mind was an exam I was destined to fail. Lena squeezed my hand with a smile too bright to be real. "It's for your own good, Evie." They walked me to the reception desk. They signed forms. They hugged me lightly, like touching me too deeply might stain them. Then they left. The doors clicked shut behind them with the finality of a casket lid. I stood there, small and shaking, a woman with no coat, no charger, no warning, just a heart splitting open in a place that smelled like bleach and lost memories. My assigned room had no photographs, no plants, no warmth, just a narrow bed and a dresser that groaned like an old secret. I asked the nurse at the desk for the phone to call my son. She apologized with a tight smile. Only during visiting hours. But he just left. She frowned. He signed your long-term admission papers, Mrs. Cross. I felt the floor tilt again. Not from dizziness this time, but from truce. He didn't intend to pick me up. Not tomorrow. Not ever. My legs trembled as I sat on the bed. My hands folded like I was praying, though the only thing I had left was disbelief. How easily a life can be stripped from you when the person you love decides you're inconvenient. 3 days passed. I asked for a phone each morning. Denied, denied, denied. On the 4th day, they finally handed me a receiver. I dialed Mason's straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail, Lena? Blocked, blocked. They had erased me digitally and physically. Like a forgotten file they deleted to make space for a better life. I stared out the window at the courtyard, watching residents shuffle past with blank eyes, some yelling into the wind, some lost in memories no longer theirs. A chill ran up my spine. Was this what they wanted for me? A quiet fading into the background until no one remembered my name? No, no, I would not go out like that. I had survived poverty. I had survived widowhood. I had survived cancer. I would survive this. But survival would not be enough. I would return, and I would make sure the people who buried me alive felt the weight of every shovelful of dirt. That night I asked the night nurse for a notebook. I like to journal, I said. She smiled warmly and brought me a small spiral one with a faded sunflower on the cover. But I didn't write poems or prayers. I wrote names, dates, bank accounts, property records, contact numbers, everything I remembered with crystal clarity, proof that my mind was not failing. At the bottom of the first page, I wrote one name, Camille Hart, my old attorney, the woman who once told me, the law listens better than people do. I dialed her number with trembling fingers. She didn't pick up, but I left a message sharp enough to slice through steel. Camille, this is Evelyn Cross. My son has placed me in a facility against my will. I believe he is attempting financial fraud. I am still mentally competent and require immediate legal assistance. I ended the call with a breath slow and steady. For the first time in days, my heartbeat felt like mine again. Camille called the next morning. Mrs. Cross? She asked, breathless. Are you safe? As safe as a woman can be, I said, when her son mistakes her strength for weakness. She exhaled sharply. I'm coming, today. And she did. She walked into that facility like fire wrapped in a blazer. Staff scrambled. Administrators whispered nervously about miscommunication. Camille entered my room and shut the door gently. You're not staying here, she said. Not another week. She opened her briefcase. Now tell me everything. And I did. Every lie, every forged signature, every quiet insult disguised as concern. Her lips tightened into a razor-sharp line. Mrs. Cross, she said, it's time to take your life back. I didn't escape that nursing home quietly. I walked out with a lawyer, a plan, and a storm my son never saw coming. When Camille Hart told me I wasn't staying in that place another week, I felt something inside me wake up, something I thought time had pushed into permanent sleep. Not youth, not pride, not rage. Something older, something stronger, something called survival. She pulled out documents, legal forms, case files, and a determination that filled the small room like its own kind of oxygen. I breathed her confidence the way I once breathed prayers. So, she said, crossing her legs with the grace of a woman who knew she belonged in every room she entered. Your son forged a power of attorney? Yes. And he signed medical consent paperwork on your behalf? Yes. And he filed for long-term placement without your knowledge? I didn't even pack a toothbrush. Meh. Her eyes sharpened. That's elder exploitation, medical misrepresentation, and housing fraud. I leaned back slowly. I figured it wasn't legal, but I didn't know the words. Well, she said with a crisp smile, I do. The facility administrator, a stiff-backed woman named Ms. Drayton, knocked gently before entering, but her expression said she wished she hadn't come at all. Mrs. Cross, she started. I'm afraid we may have misunderstood your cognitive status. No, Camille cut her off. You followed instructions from a falsified authority. Miss Drayton's shoulders stiffened. We were acting on information provided by her son. Information, Camille interrupted again, based entirely on forged documents, and his claim of mental decline would be disproven within 2 minutes of a professional evaluation. The administrator shifted uncomfortably. Well, we don't wish to get involved in a legal conflict. You already are, Camille said simply. Now the question is whether you want to be listed as complicit or cooperative. The air in the room went still. I watched the woman's face as realization settled into her bones. Not guilt, not empathy, fear of the wrong side of a lawsuit. Mrs. Cross, she said softly, we'll expedite your discharge. Today, Camille added. Yes, today. And just like that, the door closed behind her. I exhaled, a slow, trembling exhale that tasted like freedom growing wings. Camille turned to me. You're not alone anymore. I'm here now. I nodded. Thank you. She studied my face gently. Are you ready to go home? The question struck harder than I expected. Home? Did I even have one anymore? Not the house. That wasn't home. Not if Mason had already replaced my memories with his furniture. No, I said quietly, but I'm ready to leave. Camille held out her hand. Well then, let's begin. Being discharged should have felt triumphant. It didn't. It felt surreal. I packed the few things I'd been given, the notebook, a pair of slippers, a toothbrush in a paper cup. These were not my belongings. They were survival scraps. Camille carried my bag as we walked down the hallway. Residents stared at us, some blankly, some wistfully, some with a flicker of recognition that I was leaving a place they no longer had the strength to question. One woman reached out her hand toward me as I passed. Don't forget who you are, she whispered. I squeezed her fingers. I won't. Camille guided me through the double doors and into the crisp, fresh air. I inhaled, deeply, purposefully. Freedom doesn't smell like anything specific. It smells like everything you thought you'd lost. Camille unlocked her car and opened the passenger door. Where are we going? I asked. A hotel, she said. You're not stepping back into that house until we've protected every inch of your life. She saw my hesitation. You don't need to face him yet, she said softly. Let the law speak first. I nodded. It was the first time in weeks I let someone else lead without feeling small. The room Camille booked was warm, softly lit, with clean sheets and a small kitchenette. Nothing luxurious, but it felt like shelter. Safety isn't always silk and chandeliers. Sometimes it's just a quiet place with a lock you trust. She ordered food, hot soup, warm bread, strong tea. I ate slowly, tasting every bite after days of bland facility trays. When I finished, Camille placed a stack of papers on the table. This, she said, tapping the top page, is the revocation of the forged power of attorney. I stared at it. My name, his name, the lie between us. This, she continued, sliding another paper forward, is the emergency petition for legal restoration of independence. And this, she said, placing the final document down with a quiet thud, is the opening charge for elder exploitation. I blinked. Exploitation? You lost control of your finances, your autonomy, your home, and your freedom. That's exploitation. I rubbed my hands lightly. He's my son. She softened. And you are his mother, not his property. Something in me cracked. Not broken, not wounded, released. Tell me what happens next, I whispered. The next morning was a blur of paperwork and controlled fury. Camille walked into the courthouse like it belonged to her. We filed emergency revocation, capacity evaluation request, fraud suspicion notice, property protection order, banking freeze petition. Every form was a brick in the wall I was building between me and the people who had tried to bury me. By noon, the judge signed the emergency protection. You're legally restored, Camille said, handing me copies. Completely. I held the papers in my lap. For the first time in weeks, I felt like a person again, not a patient, not a burden, not a pawn, a woman, with rights, with a name, with a voice. It happened that evening. I was sitting on the edge of the hotel bed when my phone vibrated. Unknown number. But I knew. Motherhood has a way of imprinting voices into your bones. I answered slowly. Mom? Mason's voice trembled, something between fear and disbelief. I got a notice from the bank and a legal letter. What's happening? I said nothing. You froze my accounts, he whispered. Why would you do that? I swallowed. You mean the accounts you emptied while I slept in a room with no windows? That's not fair. No, Mason, I said, my voice steady. You didn't want fair. You wanted control. He went silent. I breathed in calmly. You put me away like an unwanted chore. Now you're shocked I'm alive enough to fight back? I was trying to help you. Help me. I laughed softly. You didn't even give me my coat. His breath hitched. Are you coming home? No, I said. Home doesn't live there anymore. I hung up, and it didn't hurt the way I thought it would. 2 days later, Camille and I stood outside a house. Not my house. Not yet. A small, charming single story with a rose bush out front and a pale blue porch swing. Why are we here? I asked. Because, Camille said, you deserve a safe place to heal. I blinked slowly. You bought this? She smiled. No, Evelyn, you did. My breath caught. The funds from my protected account, my own money, had secured a rental for 3 months until we resolved everything, a place that was mine, not his. I stepped onto the porch, touching the railing. It felt solid beneath my hand, sturdy, real, dependable. Things I hadn't felt in weeks. Camille put a hand on my shoulder. This is where we plan your next move. My next move? She nodded. You told me you didn't want your old house back, so now we get to choose what rebuilding looks like. I smiled faintly. I want him to understand what he did. Oh, he will, she said. And I want my freedom. You have that already. And I added softly, pain flickering through my ribs. I want my grandson to know the truth. Camille nodded. That will come. I lay in the new bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was quiet, peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. A weight lifted from me, a different weight settled in. Not fear, not grief, purpose. I opened the notebook from the facility, the one with the sunflower, and turned to a fresh page. I wrote, They tried to bury me. They forgot I grow best in the dark. Then I closed it, because tomorrow was the beginning of a different war, one I wouldn't fight with shouting or fists or chaos. I lay in the new bed, staring at the ceiling. The room was quiet, peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. A weight lifted from me, a different weight settled in. Not fear, not grief, purpose. I opened the notebook from the facility, the one with the sunflower, and turned to a fresh page. I wrote, "They tried to bury me. They forgot I grow best in the dark." Then I closed it, because tomorrow was the beginning of a different war, one I wouldn't fight with shouting or fists or chaos. I would fight it with truth, with law, with dignity, with patience sharpened into a blade, and I would win. The next morning, someone knocked on my new door. When I opened it, my entire plan changed, because the last person I expected was standing on my porch. The knock came just after sunrise, soft, uncertain, almost apologetic. Not the kind of knock delivered with authority, not the kind meant to intimidate. It was the kind of knock that carried hesitation and guilt. I froze halfway to the kitchen, one hand still wrapped around a warm mug of peppermint tea. Camille wasn't due until late morning. The landlord wasn't expected. The groceries had been delivered last night. Another knock, a softer one. I set the mug on the table and walked slowly toward the door. My feet were steady, my back straight, my breath controlled, even though my heart was fluttering in my chest like a bird unsure if the cage was really open. I opened the door, and my breath caught. Standing on my porch, backpack slung low, hair messy like he'd been running his hands through it for hours, was Aiden, my grandson, 14 years old, eyes too wise for his age. A quiet storm disguised in a boy's body. He stared at me, really stared, as though trying to decide if I was a memory or something real. "Grandma," he whispered. My chest tightened. "Aiden," I breathed, stepping aside. "Come in, sweetheart." He walked past me slowly, like he wasn't sure he deserved to be there, like he thought the floor might break beneath him. I closed the door gently, pressing my palm against it for a moment to steady my heart. Aiden turned to me, his voice cracked. "They told me you were gone." He sat at the small dining table, fingers trembling slightly as they gripped the edge. I poured him hot cocoa from the kettle I'd prepared for myself, adding 2 marshmallows the way I always did when he had nightmares as a child. He wrapped both hands around the mug for warmth. "They said you lost your memory," he muttered. "They said you weren't safe. Dad said you agreed to stay there, that you didn't want visitors." His shoulders shook once. "I knew it didn't sound like you," he whispered. But I didn't know what to believe. I sat across from him, letting the silence settle for a moment. He deserved space to breathe. "Did they tell you I fainted?" I asked softly. He nodded, and that they were helping. Another nod. I leaned in slightly. "Aiden, the fainting was real, but the rest..." I shook my head. "Your father didn't help, he hid me." Aiden stared at me, throat tight. "I knew it," he said, voice shaking. "I knew something was off. Dad's been different." "Different how?" "He won't look at me," Aiden murmured. "He won't talk to me about anything real. When I ask questions, he either yells or goes silent. And Lena, she just pretends like nothing happened." He wiped his cheek instinctively, embarrassed by the tear that escaped. "I don't know what's happening," he whispered. "But it feels like everything in that house is falling apart." I reached across the table and touched his hand. "None of that is your fault." His grip tightened. "I want to stay here," he blurted. "I don't want to go back." My heart clenched. A 14-year-old shouldn't have to choose between homes. But the truth was, the home he'd known wasn't a home anymore. "Did your father know you came here?" I asked. He shook his head. "He was asleep. He's always asleep now." "Did you walk?" Aiden nodded, eyes lowered. I inhaled slowly, drawing strength from someplace deep. "You're safe here," I said, "as long as you need." Relief washed over his face. Pure, vulnerable relief. But something else flickered there too. Pain, confusion, and something that looked like fear. "Grandma," Aiden whispered, "there's something else." He pushed the sleeves of his hoodie up, revealing faint bruises along his forearm, small, round, like the fingerprints of someone who grabbed too hard. A cold, sharp fury rose in my chest. "Aiden," I said carefully. "Who did that?" He didn't look up. "It wasn't Dad," he whispered. "Not this time." My breath stopped. "Then who?" "Lena," he said, voice cracking. "She gets mad when dinner isn't ready or when I forget laundry. She says I make her life harder. I tried to tell Dad, but he just says she's stressed." I felt heat spread across my face. Not anger, rage. A controlled, simmering rage I hadn't felt since I fought through chemotherapy with a husband who refused to let me go. "Aiden," I said softly, "you will never go back into that house alone again. Do you understand me?" He nodded, breath trembling. "And you will never hide something like this from me again," I added gently but firmly. "You are my grandson, my blood, my heart, not their punching bag." His eyes filled instantly. He leaned forward, and for the first time in years he hugged me the way he used to when he was little, arms tight, face buried in my shoulder, breath shaking with all the things no one had listened to. I held him. I held him the way Mason never held me when I needed him. I held him the way Lena never learned how to hold anything but control. I held him the way I once held his father, before life taught him cruelty was easier than compassion. At 9:47 a.m., Camille arrived with her usual briskness, heels tapping purposefully on the steps. When she saw Aiden, her surprise softened quickly into warmth. "And who might you be?" she asked gently. "My grandson," I said. "The one who wasn't supposed to know I existed anymore." Aiden looked down. Camille knelt so she was eye level with him. "Your grandmother's safe now," she said quietly. "And so are you, no matter what happens next." Aiden nodded slowly. Then Camille's expression shifted, subtle but sharp. "Evelyn," she said, turning to me, "are you ready for phase 2? "Phase 2? Aiden repeated. Camille looked between us. "Your grandmother is getting her life back, and that includes her home." Aiden blinked. "You're going back to the house?" Camille answered before I could. "No, she's not going back." She smiled. "She's taking it back." I inhaled, slowly, steadily, powerfully. We sat at the dining table, me, Camille, and Aiden, listening intently as she laid out the strategy. "Step 1 was freeing you," Camille said. "Step 2 is reclaiming your property." I folded my hands. "And how do we do that?" "With proof," she said. "Proof of fraud, proof of manipulation, proof of abandonment." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out printed emails. "These," she said, sliding them across the table, "are the communications between your son and the facility." My breath caught. Mason had written, "Please keep her for long-term evaluation. She cannot manage her home. We've already begun transition arrangements." Transition arrangements. He'd decided on my future before he ever drove me there. Another email. "She won't understand the paperwork. Just have her sign whatever you need." A shiver ran down my spine. He didn't think I'd fight back. He didn't think I'd understand. He didn't think I'd live to read his lies, Camille continued. "Step 3 is forcing a property reassessment. You still legally own the house, Evelyn. Mason was living there under false pretenses. That gives us leverage." "What kind of leverage?" I asked. She smiled slow and sharp. "We can force him out." Aiden's eyes widened. "Like, make him move?" "Yes," Camille said. "Because legally he has no right to stay." I leaned back in my chair. The idea felt unreal, strange, powerful. But Camille wasn't finished. "And step 4, she said, is deciding what justice means to you." I swallowed. Justice. Not revenge. Not spite. Justice. "What choices do I have?" I asked quietly. Camille looked at me carefully. You can reclaim the house and evict him. You can sell it and take the profit. You can press charges. You can pursue damages. Or, she paused, you can choose something more poetic. Aiden looked up. Like what? Camille smiled. You could buy the home next door. The idea hit me like a cold breeze through an open window. Not cruel, not vindictive, symmetrical. You mean, I murmured, live beside him? Camille nodded. You wouldn't have to speak to him. You wouldn't owe him anything. You wouldn't even need to let him near you. Aiden's lips parted. That would be intense. I closed my eyes briefly. I imagined Mason walking outside every morning, seeing me on a porch he thought he'd erased me from. Not yelling, not gloating, just living. Living in a way he couldn't ignore. Living was sometimes the strongest form of confrontation. I'll think about it, I said. Camille nodded. I expected you would. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. An unknown number again. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to. I placed the phone to my ear. A low, shaky voice whispered, Mom, please, I need to see you. Mason. Aiden froze across from me, his eyes widening. Camille looked up calmly, waiting. I breathed slowly. No, I said. Not yet. Mom, you made choices, I said softly. Now I'm making mine. I hung up. Aiden let out a breath he'd been holding. You don't owe him anything, he said. I placed my hand over his. No, sweetheart, I don't. The next morning, an envelope appeared on my porch. No name, no return address. Inside was a secret that shattered everything I thought I knew about Mason. And the war changed instantly. The envelope looked harmless at first glance. Plain white, thin, lying neatly on my porch, as though the morning wind had set it there like a leaf. But wind doesn't choose envelopes. Wind doesn't place things dead center in front of your door. Wind doesn't tuck secrets inside paper. Aiden spotted it first. Grandma, he said softly from behind me. Did someone leave that? I bent slowly and picked it up. No writing, no markings, no stamp. Just weight, light, but ominous. Camille wasn't due yet, and Mason didn't have the courage for anything anonymous. My fingers slid under the flap. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper and one printed photograph. My heart stilled. The photograph was of Mason, not as a child, not as a father, as a man cornered. Evelyn Cross, you don't know me, but I know your son, and I know what he's been hiding from you. My pulse quickened. Mason isn't cruel by nature. He's drowning. He's been drowning for a long time. Aiden leaned in, eyes wide, reading silently alongside me. He didn't send you to that facility because he didn't love you. He sent you there because he's in debt that could ruin him, ruin your grandson, ruin everything. I swallowed, my throat tightening. Debt? Mason? No, he'd always been irresponsible but ruined? I continued reading. A year ago, he co-signed on a loan for a friend who disappeared. The collectors had been circling him. They threatened to seize assets. He panicked, and then he did something irreversible. Aiden's breath shook beside me. I kept reading, my hands trembling. He moved into your home to protect it from being taken. He put you in the facility because they pressured him, telling him the assets would be safer if he restructured ownership. They lied. He believed them. My chest felt heavy, as though the air around me had thickened. He didn't throw me away just because he could. He threw me away because he was desperate, manipulated, terrified, but he still threw me away. The letter continued. This is not forgiveness for him. This is explanation. He still made his choice. He still took your freedom, but you deserve the truth before you choose your final move. The last line made my blood run cold. He is not your enemy. Lena is. The letter ended with no signature. Silence filled the room like smoke. Aiden looked up at me, eyes shining. Grandma, Dad didn't tell me any of that. I placed the letter and photograph on the table, staring at them like they were ghosts of a story I hadn't agreed to be part of. Because guilt, I murmured, has a way of holding a man hostage. Aiden hesitated. Do you still think he deserves what's coming? I looked at the photograph of Mason crying alone in that restaurant. He looked like a little boy again, lost, scared, cracked. But fear didn't excuse betrayal. That didn't justify throwing me away. Manipulation didn't erase the bruise on Aiden's arm. Slowly I breathed in. Deserve? I whispered. That's a complicated word. Aiden watched me carefully. But justice, I added, is not complicated at all. When Camille arrived, she read the letter with a level of calm that only came from years in the legal trenches. Well, she said flatly, this changes the color of the fire but not the flames. Aiden frowned. What does that mean? It means your father was manipulated, Camille said. But he still signed illegal documents. He still lied. He still abandoned his mother. And your stepmother? Her voice hardened. She's the one who benefited, which makes her legally vulnerable. Aiden swallowed. Camille placed the letter on the table. This doesn't absolve Mason. It just explains his panic. But the legal consequences don't vanish because someone was scared. I nodded slowly. Camille leaned forward. What matters now, she said, is what you want to do with this information. I stared at the envelope. The easy path was revenge. The predictable path was bitterness. The satisfying path was vengeance. But I wasn't a woman of easy paths. I want to continue, I said quietly. Camille exhaled in approval. Then we will. After a long silence, Camille stood. Evelyn, this letter says one more thing you might have missed. I raised an eyebrow. She tapped the photograph. Someone is watching Mason. Someone close enough to know his movements. Someone who wants you to have the upper hand. Aiden stiffened. Who would do that? Camille shook her head. I don't know. But they're on your side. She put the photo down gently. We move forward, but now we widen the scope. We investigate Lena's role. We trace the debt. We follow the money. And we prepare for court. Aiden swallowed. Court? Yes, Camille said calmly. If your grandmother wants her house back and her autonomy recognized publicly, we need a full hearing. My stomach tightened. Court. A battlefield with rules. A place where truth and lies fight with paperwork instead of fists. Will he show up? I whispered. Camille nodded. Oh, he'll show. Men like Mason only ignore problems until they turn into legal summons. Her smile sharpened. And I plan to deliver one. Later that afternoon, after Aiden went to take a nap upstairs, there was another knock. I opened the door to find Lena standing there, lipstick perfect, hair immaculate, holding a plastic container of lemon cake like she was auditioning for Neighborhood Sweetheart. The sight of her made my pulse pound. Evelyn, she said sweetly, we need to talk. I didn't move aside. Then talk. She glanced inside the house, eyes searching for Aiden. Is he here? Why? I asked, voice cold. Because, she said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. He's been very disrespectful lately. I think he's confused. If you're influencing him... I stepped forward so quickly she blinked. Influencing? I repeated. She nodded daintily. Mason told me you've been manipulating things, filing unnecessary documents, stirring up trouble. And I think Aiden's caught in the middle. I smiled slowly, the kind of smile that isn't sweetness. It's warning. Lena, I said, Aiden's bruises say he's caught in the middle of something else. Her face paled. I never... Don't, I said quietly. I know what fingerprints look like. Her breath hitched. You're ruining everything, she hissed. We had a plan. We, I interrupted. You and Mason. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. Mason didn't plan anything, I said softly. You did. Her eyes narrowed. You think you know what you're doing, she whispered, but you don't understand how deep this goes. I tilted my head. Then enlighten me. Lena leaned forward. Mason is not the problem, she said. I am, and you're about to regret pushing me. I held her gaze. I buried a husband, I said softly. I survived cancer. I survived losing a home, a life, and a son. After dinner, Aiden sat with me on the porch, watching cars pass lazily down the street. He hesitated. Grandma, he said softly, what's going to happen to Dad? I breathed in the night air, cool, cleansing. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but he will face the truth, and I will face mine. Aiden leaned his head on my shoulder. I'm glad you're here, he said. I'm not going anywhere, I whispered. Not again. Not ever. 2 days later, the doorbell rang. This time, it wasn't Mason. It wasn't Lena. It wasn't even the anonymous messenger. It was the police. The police officer standing on my porch wasn't intimidating. He wasn't loud. He didn't even rest a hand on his holster the way officers sometimes do when they expect trouble. He just stood there quietly, hat tucked under one arm, expression unreadable. Mrs. Evelyn Cross? He asked. I gripped the edge of the door, my pulse steady, but alert. Yes. He nodded once. We need to speak with you. Aiden appeared behind me so fast I didn't hear his footsteps. Did something happen to my dad? He blurted. The officer shook his head gently. No, son. He's fine. But the pause after fine didn't sit right. He turned back to me. Ma'am, it's regarding a report filed on your behalf. My stomach tightened. Camille appeared at the end of the hallway. She'd arrived 5 minutes earlier and was reviewing documents when the bell rang. She stepped beside me, hands calm at her sides. What report? She asked. The officer unfolded a small tablet and tapped the screen. An anonymous call was made early this morning. Caller claimed Mrs. Cross and her grandson were in immediate danger. I felt Aiden stiffen beside me. Danger? From who? Anonymous? Camille repeated, jaw tightening. And what name was attached to the digital trail? The officer glanced down. The number was blocked, but the voice print has a match. My breath froze. He lifted his eyes. The call came from Lena Cross. Aiden inhaled sharply. What did she say? I asked, voice low. The officer cleared his throat. She stated that Mason had become unstable, that he'd left the house after an argument, that he was threatening to fix everything before you ruin him. And she claimed he might come here. My heart dropped. Mason? Here? Aiden's voice trembled. Dad wouldn't hurt her. The officer nodded. Maybe not, but the call was serious enough that we're required to check on your safety. Camille stepped forward. Officer, do you have reason to believe the caller was truthful? He hesitated. Ma'am, the tone of the call wasn't malicious. It sounded more like panic. Panic. That word again. My fingers curled around the doorframe. Where is Mason now? I asked tightly. The officer checked his tablet. His car was found pulled over on Willow Bend Road about an hour ago. Door open, engine running, no sign of him. Aiden whispered, Oh my God. The officer continued. He's missing. And based on the call, he may come here, desperate, upset, or confused. Aiden clutched my arm. Grandma. I put my hand over his. I'm fine, I whispered. We're fine. But inside, my heart was pounding, not from fear of violence, but from the thought that the son who abandoned me might be unraveling in real time. The officer straightened. We'll patrol the street. Please lock your doors. Call if he arrives. He tipped his hat and walked down the porch steps, leaving a trail of unanswered questions behind him. I closed the door gently. Inside, the silence was heavy. Aiden sank onto the couch. Camille exhaled sharply, and I lifted the envelope from earlier. The anonymous one. Lena, Camille muttered. Of course it was her. She's losing control. Aiden's voice was barely audible. Do you think Dad is okay? I paused, then slowly shook my head. I don't know. The next few hours moved like thick syrup. Slow, weighted, full of tension that clung to the walls. Aiden sat near me, restless hands tapping on his knees. Every sound outside made him flinch. I wanted to comfort him, hold him, tell him it would be fine. But truth is sharper than comfort. We didn't know if it would be fine. At 5 p.m., Camille stepped away to take a call from her paralegal. I sat beside Aiden. He leaned into me. What if he comes here and he's not himself? He whispered. I put my arm around him. Then we will face him together. His eyes welled. I don't want him to hate us. I kissed his forehead. He never hated you, I said. He just forgot how to love himself. Aiden's throat bobbed. Do you still love him? I didn't answer for a long moment. Then, yes, I whispered, but I don't trust him. It came at dusk. 3 slow knocks. Not urgent, not violent. Almost exhausted. Aiden jumped. Camille rushed from the kitchen. I stood. Something in my bones knew. I opened the door, and there he was. Mason, not the polished, prideful son who dropped me at a facility, not the confident man who thought he owned my future. This Mason looked broken, eyes red, clothes wrinkled, hands trembling. Mom, he whispered, voice cracking. I didn't know where else to go. Aiden stepped behind me, peering over my shoulder. Dad? Mason saw him, and something inside him shattered entirely. Oh God! Aiden! He covered his face with both hands. I messed up. I messed everything up. Camille stepped forward. Mason, you need to leave, she said firmly. This is not safe. He shook his head. No, I need to tell her. I need to say it before I lose everything. I held up a hand. Let him speak, I said quietly. Camille hesitated, then nodded once. Mason looked at me. Really looked, with the face of the little boy who once scraped his knees running into my arms, with the pain of the man who had dug himself into a grave of lies. Mom, he whispered, I didn't mean to hurt you. My throat tightened. He continued. I was drowning. Lena kept pushing. The debt collectors kept calling. I was scared. Scared of losing the house. Scared of them seizing everything. Scared Aiden would see me fail. Tears slipped down his cheeks. I didn't know what to do. And then Lena said, putting you in that place would protect the assets. She said it was temporary. She said I was doing the right thing. He shook his head violently. But I knew it wasn't. Even when I drove away, I knew. Aiden stepped beside me, silent. I'm sorry, Mason choked. I'm so sorry. I swallowed hard. Sorry doesn't erase the harm, I said softly. He nodded, tears dripping. I know, but I needed you to hear it before the court takes everything. My breath caught. He knew about the case. He knew what was coming. Dad, Aiden whispered painfully. Mason turned to him and sobbed. I failed you too. Aiden let out a strangled sound, half anger, half heartbreak. You hurt Grandma, he whispered. I don't know how to forgive that. Mason fell to his knees on my porch, not metaphorically, literally. A grown man brought low by truth. Mom, he whispered, I accept whatever you decide. For a long moment no one spoke. Even the world outside was still, as if waiting for the verdict. I knelt slowly in front of him. Mason, I said softly, I loved you long before you knew what love was. He cried harder. I protected you, fed you, worked myself into bone-deep exhaustion for you. I know, he whispered. And you left me in a room like I was a burden. He lowered his head. But, I continued gently, you are still my son. He looked up, stunned. That doesn't mean there aren't consequences, I said. There will be. He nodded slowly. And your house, I exhaled, will no longer be your house. He closed his eyes, bracing. But Gisbaek, I added, this punishment ends with dignity. He blinked. You will move out. You will face legal responsibility. You will rebuild yourself from the ground up, and you will work to earn back trust, not mine, but Aiden's. Aiden inhaled sharply, and after all of that, I said, if you still want to be in my life, we will see. Mason's face crumpled. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me. I did give up, I said gently, but forgiveness isn't the same as trust. 3 weeks later, Mason moved out of my old house, not by force, but by responsibility. He accepted the court ruling, he apologized publicly, he agreed to counseling, debt management, supervised custody time with Aiden. And me? I did something unexpected. I bought the house next door, not to torment, not to haunt, to remind him I survived, and I am stronger than the people who tried to erase me. Aiden lives with me now, legally, safely, joyfully, and my new home, it's mine, it's peaceful. It's filled with fresh paint, warm light, and the smell of cinnamon. I sit on my porch every morning, roses blooming at my feet. Sometimes Mason walks outside, gives a small wave. I nod back. Not enemies. Not family as before. Something new. Something rebuilding. Life after ruin. They tried to bury me, but they didn't know I was a garden.